There's a moment when someone reveals everything about themselves without saying a word. A split second where their mask drops and you see exactly who they are beneath the performance. Most people miss it because they're listening to words instead of watching patterns, but Machiavelli never missed it. He couldn't afford to. In a world where survival meant knowing who to trust and who to destroy, Machiavelli developed something most men never master: the ability to read weakness instantly. Not the obvious kind, not the man who cries or begs or runs, the subtle kind, the dangerous kind, the weakness that hides behind confidence, behind charm, behind the loudest voice in the room. Because here's what Machiavelli understood that you probably don't. Weak men don't announce themselves. They disguise themselves. They wear strength like a costume, hoping no one looks too closely at the man underneath. But if you know what to watch for, if you understand the 3 behaviors that betray every weak man alive, you gain something invaluable: the power to see through anyone, the power to predict how they'll break before they even know they're cracking, the power to position yourself accordingly while everyone else gets blindsided by the collapse. Today I'm going to show you exactly what Machiavelli saw, the 3 behaviors that instantly separate the wolves from the sheep, the strong from the pretenders, the men who command from the men who only think they do. And once you see these patterns, you'll never be fooled again. Behavior 1. The explanation addiction. Listen carefully to how a man defends his decisions. The strong man decides. The weak man explains. That's it. That's the entire game. A man who constantly justifies his choices, over-explains his actions, or needs others to understand his reasoning isn't being thorough. He's being insecure. He's begging for permission to exist. Machiavelli saw this everywhere in the courts of power. The confident prince spoke little, but commanded much. But the nervous minister? The ambitious merchant trying to prove his worth? The man pretending to belong in rooms above his station? He talked endlessly. He explained his logic until everyone was tired of listening. He defended decisions that no one had questioned. He turned simple statements into lengthy speeches because somewhere inside, he feared that without explanation, without approval, without agreement, his authority would vanish. And he was right to fear that. Because it would. Watch this pattern in your own life. The man who needs to explain why he said no to your request. The boss who spends 10 minutes justifying a decision that should have taken 10 seconds. The friend who can't make a simple choice without walking you through his entire thought process. These men are advertising their weakness with every word. Because true authority doesn't need to be explained. It simply exists. When a strong man makes a decision, he might give you the conclusion, but he doesn't give you the internal struggle. He doesn't show you his doubts. He doesn't need your agreement to validate his choice. But the weak man, he explains because he's not actually decided. He's still seeking approval. He's still hoping someone will tell him he's right, because he doesn't know if he is. His explanation isn't information. It's a plea. Please agree with me so I can feel confident in what I just said. Please understand my reasoning so you won't judge me for this choice. Please validate my thinking so I know I'm not making a mistake. That's what you're really hearing when someone over-explains. Not confidence, not clarity. Fear wearing the mask of thoroughness. The explanation addiction reveals something deeper. This man's identity depends on being liked, not respected. Not feared, liked. And Machiavelli knew that any man who needs approval before he moves will never be trusted with real power. Because power requires silence. Power requires conviction. Power requires the ability to make a move and live with the consequences without needing anyone's permission or understanding. So when you see this behavior, When someone keeps repeating their point, adjusting their message based on the room, trying to sound reasonable or nice or morally correct, you're not witnessing strength. You're watching weakness in slow motion. The man is telling you he can't be trusted with important decisions because he doesn't even trust himself. Behavior 2. Weaponized niceness. This one is dangerous because it looks like virtue. The weak man who appears agreeable, helpful, accommodating, who smiles at everyone and offends no one, who stays quiet when he should speak and apologizes not because he's wrong, but because he's scared. Machiavelli saw through this immediately, because there's a difference between kindness and submission. A strong man can be kind, but his kindness is selective, deliberate, and never at the cost of his self-respect. A weak man tries to be agreeable at all times because he's using niceness as a shield. He agrees to avoid tension. He compliments to be liked. He says yes when he means no, because saying no feels dangerous. He apologizes preemptively, not from guilt but from fear of rejection. This is submission disguised as virtue. And it always backfires, because when being nice doesn't earn him the validation he craves, when his endless accommodation doesn't protect him from conflict, when people start taking his kindness for granted, he flips. He becomes bitter, sarcastic, passive-aggressive. Suddenly the mask drops, and you see what was always underneath. Resentment, anger, the fury of a man who gave everything and got nothing in return. But here's the truth that weak men never understand. His niceness was never kindness. It was a strategy, a negotiation. I'll be agreeable, and in exchange, you'll like me. You'll include me. You'll never hurt me. And when that contract gets broken, when people don't appreciate his sacrifice, when they expect more than he can give, when they dare to criticize him despite his endless accommodation, he reveals what he was really doing all along, trading his dignity for temporary safety. Machiavelli studied this pattern in politicians constantly. He wrote, "A prince must know how to do wrong and not use it unless compelled." In other words, restraint is not the same as fear. The ability to be ruthless, held in check by wisdom, is strength. But the inability to be anything but nice, that's weakness wearing a smile. And the truly dangerous part about weaponized niceness is this: it creates an expectation. When someone is always agreeable, always accommodating, always saying yes, people begin to expect it. They stop asking and start assuming. They stop appreciating and start demanding. And the weak man, who built his entire identity around being liked, suddenly finds himself trapped. He can't set boundaries because that would mean disappointing people. He can't say no because that would mean conflict. He can't stop giving because then what would he be? So he gives more, accommodates more, smiles wider while dying inside, until one day he breaks and everyone acts surprised. But he was so nice, so helpful. What happened? What happened is simple. You witnessed a man who never learned the difference between kindness and cowardice, between being good and being weak, between choosing to be gentle and being afraid to be anything else. Machiavelli would watch for this behavior like a predator watches for limping prey, because he knew something critical. A man who can't say no to anyone can't be trusted to say yes to you when it matters. His loyalty will break the moment it's tested. His boundaries will collapse under the first real pressure. His niceness will turn to poison when he realizes it never protected him at all. Behavior 3. Display addiction. The third behavior is the most pathetic and the most dangerous. The man who always needs to be seen, who can't sit still without recognition, who posts constantly, speaks loudly, exaggerates every win, and turns every moment into a performance. Machiavelli saw these men everywhere in the courts of power, and he understood something that most people still don't. The man who needs to be seen fears being forgotten. That fear is weakness in its purest form, but not the weakness that comes from poverty or lack of opportunity, the weakness that comes from identity rot, from having nothing inside worth protecting, from existing only in the eyes of others. Display addiction isn't confidence, it's panic. The panic response of someone who has no internal foundation, no core self that exists independent of attention, no identity that survives without applause. These men think if they aren't being talked about, liked, praised, or envied, then they don't matter. Their value disappears the moment attention does. They exist only when others are watching, and this is precisely why Machiavelli saw them as liabilities, because these men will do anything for attention, lie, embellish, betray. They'll expose secrets, turn on allies, create enemies out of thin air, as long as someone is watching. In their mind, silence means death. Stillness means irrelevance. And the worst fate imaginable is to be forgotten. Watch this pattern. The man who can't tell a story without making himself the hero. The woman who posts every meal, every thought, every moment of her day. The colleague who always needs credit, always needs recognition, always needs to be included in every conversation. These people are advertising their desperation with every move. Because while strong men build in private, grow in silence, and strike without warning, the weak man can't survive 5 minutes without being noticed. He's easy to predict, easier to manipulate, and impossible to trust. Here's how you can spot display addiction in real time. They monopolize conversations. Every story someone else tells reminds them of a story about themselves. Every achievement you mention is immediately matched by something they did. They can't let anyone else hold the spotlight for longer than they can tolerate. They document everything. Not because the moments are meaningful, but because if it's not posted, it didn't happen. Their life exists to be performed, not lived. The experience is secondary to the image. They name drop constantly. They need you to know who they know, where they've been, what they've done, because their identity is a collection of external associations, not internal strength. They take credit aggressively, even for group efforts, even for ideas that weren't originally theirs. They can't let success exist without their name attached to it. They react poorly to being ignored, not just disappointment, rage, confusion, desperation, because being ignored isn't just rejection to them, it's existential terror. Machiavelli knew that a man addicted to display is a puppet waiting to be controlled. And if you ever want to destroy him, you don't need to attack. You just ignore him. Take away the spotlight. Cut off the applause. Make him feel invisible. Watch how quickly he breaks. Because while the strong man uses solitude to sharpen himself, the weak man uses attention to avoid himself. And when that attention disappears, there's nothing left. Machiavelli didn't just identify weakness, he weaponized it. Once he spotted these 3 behaviors, the explanation addiction, the weaponized niceness, the display addiction, he turned them into tools, predictors, leverage points, because he understood something critical. Weak men don't just reveal themselves through these behaviors. They become controllable through them. The over-explainer craves understanding. So Machiavelli would listen, nod, make eye contact, say, "That makes perfect sense." And instantly, that man would attach himself to Machiavelli, desperate for more of that rare validation, willing to defend him, support him, even spy for him. All because Machiavelli made him feel understood. But it was never understanding. It was leverage. The people-pleaser wanted to feel safe, included, chosen. So Machiavelli would give him a role, make him feel valuable. Let him believe he was finally part of something powerful. And that man would never betray Machiavelli, not because of loyalty, but because betrayal would mean losing the only thing keeping his fragile identity together. The attention addict needed to be seen. So Machiavelli would offer him the stage. Let him speak in meetings. Let him take public credit for ideas that served Machiavelli's goals. Let him wear the costume of influence while Machiavelli remained the one writing the script. Because he knew, if you give a weak man the illusion of power, he'll never question who actually holds it. This is how empires are built. Not with war, not with blood, with psychological engineering. You identify the weak, then you let them build your palace out of their desperation to be seen, approved, and included. And if they ever turn on you, you don't fight. You just withdraw the attention. Let them collapse in silence. Let them destroy themselves in a desperate attempt to feel powerful again. Because nothing crushes a weak man faster than being ignored by the person whose approval shaped him. But here's what Machiavelli feared most: becoming the very weakness he despised in others. Because weakness doesn't just live in other people, it whispers in your own mind every single day, through the need to explain yourself, through the compulsion to be liked, through the craving for applause, through the silence you should have filled but didn't, through the apology you gave not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid. So ask yourself these questions. Answer them honestly, because the truth will either free you or destroy you, but it won't leave you where you are. Do you explain your decisions more than you need to? When you say no, do you spend 10 minutes explaining why? When you make a choice, do you need others to agree before you feel confident? Do you adjust your message based on who's listening? If yes, you're begging for permission to exist. You're advertising that your authority is negotiable, that your decisions are up for debate, that you need approval to feel sure of yourself. Strong men decide. Weak men explain. Are you nice because you choose to be, or because you're afraid not to be? Do you say yes when you mean no? Do you apologize preemptively? Do you avoid conflict even when you should engage? Do you get bitter when your kindness isn't appreciated? If yes, you're using niceness as a shield. You're trading your dignity for temporary safety. You're teaching people that your boundaries are suggestions, not rules. Real kindness comes from strength. Weak kindness comes from fear. Do you need to be seen to feel valuable? Do you document everything you do? Do you monopolize conversations? Do you take credit aggressively? Do you name drop constantly? Do you react poorly to being ignored? If yes, you're addicted to attention. Your identity depends on external validation. You exist only when others are watching, and that makes you controllable by anyone who understands your need. Strong men build in private. Weak men perform in public. These aren't comfortable questions. They're surgical. They're designed to cut through the stories you tell yourself and expose what's actually driving your behavior. Because if you can spot these patterns in yourself, you can kill them. If you can see your weakness clearly, you can turn it into strength. But if you can't, if you lie to yourself about what you really are, then you become the very man that Machiavelli would have used and discarded. The choice is yours. But the patterns don't lie. Once you've identified the weakness within yourself, the real work begins. Because awareness without action is just intellectual entertainment. And Machiavelli wasn't interested in entertainment. He was interested in power. Here's how you build immunity to the 3 behaviors that expose weak men. Start speaking in conclusions, not processes. When someone asks why you made a decision, give them the result, not the reasoning. I'm not available Thursday instead of, well, I was thinking about Thursday, and I have this thing, and I'm not sure if I should. But I think it's better if practice saying no without justification. No is a complete sentence. The moment you add because you're negotiating, you're inviting debate, you're suggesting your decision is up for discussion. Train yourself to sit with other people's discomfort. When you don't explain, some people will push back. They'll ask more questions. They'll seem confused or frustrated. Good. That's their problem, not yours. Your job isn't to make everyone understand you. Your job is to be clear about what you will and won't do. Stop repeating yourself. If you said it once clearly, it doesn't need to be said again. Repetition is weakness disguised as emphasis. It signals that you don't trust your own words to carry weight. Learn the difference between kindness and cowardice. Kindness chooses when to be gentle. Cowardice can't choose to be anything else. Real kindness sometimes says hard truths. Real kindness sometimes refuses unreasonable requests. Real kindness sometimes lets people face consequences instead of rescuing them. Practice strategic disagreement, not arguing for the sake of it, but refusing to nod along when you don't actually agree. Most weak men go along to get along. Strong men go along when it serves them, and stand alone when it doesn't. Set boundaries before you need them. Don't wait until you're overwhelmed to start saying no. Don't wait until you're resentful to start asking for what you need. Weak boundaries invite violation. Strong boundaries prevent the need for enforcement. Stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Sorry I'm late when traffic was bad. Sorry to bother you when you have a legitimate question. Sorry for the confusion when someone else misunderstood. Every unnecessary apology is a small surrender of your position. Build an internal scorecard. Success that needs to be announced isn't success, it's performance. Real achievement feels complete whether anyone knows about it or not. Start measuring your wins by how they change your life, not by how they change your image. Practice invisibility. Do important work that no one sees. Make decisions that no one applauds. Build skills that no one notices. The strong man is comfortable being unknown because his identity doesn't depend on recognition. Stop documenting everything. Live moments instead of posting them. Have conversations instead of collecting quotes. Build relationships instead of growing followers. The most powerful people in the world are often the ones you've never heard of. Let other people have credit. Not because you're being generous, but because you're so secure in your own value that you don't need external validation to know what you contributed. When you stop chasing credit, you start accumulating real influence. Respond to being ignored with indifference, not fake indifference, real indifference. Because when your identity doesn't depend on attention, being ignored is just information, not injury. This isn't about becoming cold or cruel. It's about becoming unshakable. It's about building an identity so solid that external circumstances can't crack it, so that criticism can't destabilize you, so that praise can't intoxicate you, so that rejection can't break you. Because once you've killed these 3 behaviors in yourself, something strange happens. People start treating you differently. They speak more carefully around you. They seek your approval more eagerly. They respect your boundaries more completely. Not because you demanded it, because you demonstrated it. And that's the final lesson Machiavelli understood. Respect isn't demanded or begged for. It's engineered. built through daily choices that strengthen your position instead of weakening it, through saying what you mean without apology, through being kind without being weak, through building value without broadcasting it, through becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to prove he's strong because his strength is evident in every choice he makes. That's the Machiavellian way. Not domination through force, but influence through presence. Not controlling others through fear, but commanding respect through unshakable personal authority. The weak man reveals himself through his patterns. The strong man reveals himself through his silence. Which one will you choose to become?